start off, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Tony Walsh. I'm the founder of Phantom Compass, which is a studio based in and around the Toronto area in Canada. And we make a game called Auto Age Standoff, which is Twisted Metal plus Rocket League plus G.I. Joe cartoons.
It's such an earworm of a main theme. I still am trying to get it out of my head.
Yeah, we sing it constantly still after a year. It's been out for a year, at least for us. Can't get it out.
All right, so will you be hosting or shall I?
Sure, I'll host. Yeah, I'll host, and we'll do team deathmatch. And if you want to do co-op, I can switch you to my team, or we can go head-to-head or whatever.
We've gone head-to-head a lot while I was actually reviewing the title, so I'm good for co-op this time around.
All right,
race circles around everybody.
Right. All right. Well, let's do 10 players on Hot Dam, which is a pretty good team deathmatch map. And I think at least one of the staff members who's not super busy today is going to join us, but I'll wait till the lobby fills up. So my game name is called Project Asymmetrical Ward.
See it joining now.
Great.
And to start, let's go something right away. What inspired Auto Age? Because car combat games kind of faded away for a while.
Yeah, I think it was time to bring the genre back. We were really interested in, a bunch of us in the studio are longtime car combat fans. So we used to play games like Twisted Metal, and even predating that, Car Wars was a tabletop war game that inspired basically all the car combat video games. Other titles would be Interstate 76, Vigilante 8, Carmageddon. So yeah, we loved that genre, and we were interested in doing something along those lines.
Very nice.
All right, I'm going to get this game started, and we can chat while we're playing.
Yep. Actually, this brings to mind one of the questions I wanted to ask. Along with Darkjaw, we see this thing about neon ninjas, and also for when you're playing with Valentina's team, we see about these very G.I. Joe-esque cars. What's going on there with these other factions?
So in the world of Auto Age, there are a lot of different kind of power plays happening in the Dead Zone, which is around where the Sage base area is in our story. It's post-apocalyptic, but there's been a long period of recovery where civilization has kind of clawed its way back to some semblance of normality. The whole world is powered by Energite, which is our sort of fictitious fuel source, clearly inspired by Transformers Energon. And evidence of that fuel source are found in various maps. Will have unstable Energite deposits, which are lethal for cars. But once it's refined, it's a good fuel source. And the keeper of that fuel source is an AI called Sage. And in our tutorial story, the lead character, Val Vega, meets Sage and becomes a sort of a partner to Sage in trying to stitch back the two coasts of America together, because right now they're divided by the Western wastes, and predatory warlords make life difficult for survivors in those areas. So the main vehicle sets represent the main protagonist and antagonist factions. So there's the Sage group of vehicles, which are the white vehicles with orange piping. And then there's Darkjaw vehicles, which are sort of the prototypical or stereotypical bad guys. And then they have kind of partner factions that work with them. And so Sage has S-Force, which is kind of a paramilitary group that works alongside Team Vega. It's part of Team Vega. And on the other side, we have the Neon Ninjas, who have agreed to work with Darkjaw. You'll see in some of the map descriptions, we have little hints at this lore, and we'll continue to roll that out in map descriptions. But basically, it's an uneasy truce that Darkjaw has with the Neon Ninjas. So if we ever decide to do more story-based content, we'll probably be expanding some of these side stories.
That actually is something else I wanted to ask about. Is the story really sticks out to you? You nailed that feel for this retro G.I. Joe meets Mad Max sort of setting, and kind of curious to see more of that. I mean, we even got a guy who manages to do the Starscream screechy voice.
Yeah, we had a great time working with that actor. I think we wanted to keep the focus on this multiplayer, especially with, it's an indie budget, and so we don't have a ton of money to do like every conceivable mode. And we thought that if people were really excited by story mode, it would be definitely something we can expand in terms of small one-shot missions. I don't know if a full-on campaign is going to be possible unless we're able to raise some more money, because it's not cheap to produce this stuff, especially where more voice actors and studio time is required. But we enjoyed doing the tutorial. We'd love to do more of it.
That does raise an interesting point of discussion today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on. With the recent rise in multiplayer and single player only games becoming a big thing again, what's your feel on games like Overwatch and stuff like that, where there is no single player component whatsoever? Even the tutorial is basically just here's how to play, and then everything else is just the barks and stuff like that the characters give, and leave the story to be expanded in other ways. How do you feel about that?
I like that approach personally. I mean, I come from a lot of multiplayer only games, competitive multiplayer games, so I'm really okay with that kind of setup. I think also it places a lot of room for fans to come up with their own stories and fan theories and fan fiction, and can give the developers ideas that if they wanted to expand any of this, they could. I think when there's room for people to kind of come up with their own scenarios, or shipping characters or whatever, like that's definitely inspired by the lack of story content. So people will kind of find it, and if they can't find it, they'll create it. For us, it was more a matter of, we really wanted a competitive multiplayer game. We thought of the story-based content as a nice prologue, I guess, with the idea that if people felt strongly about it and we could figure out a way to raise the money to do it, we would always add story content.
Yeah, cool. And in terms of multiplayer content, you've got a few modes and maps to start off with. They're all solid, but what's on the horizon? What should all the various navigating vagabonds of the wasteland be looking out for?
Yeah, we have a 1.1 patch out now, which has a new map in it and a new vehicle, and 1.2 should be within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And in that patch, we'll have a new mode, which is tentatively called Reverse Tag. It's a bit similar to Shine Thief from Mario Kart, where there's a token that everybody wants to get. Once you pick up the token, your vehicle has it, and you can get hunted down by other people in multiplayer. When they kill your vehicle, you drop the token, they can pick it up. So that's a new mode that's going in, and that'll set us up to do Capture the Flag, because some of the mechanics that are involved in that mode are similar to Capture the Flag, but it's easier to do that one first. So definitely looking at supporting this title beyond just release. I mean, we've actually literally done that. We've continued to release updates and fixes and new content, and really we're going to keep doing that as long as it makes sense and people are interested in the game. There will be some limits as to what we can do, but we have 6 vehicles lined up for a future patch. Those will probably go into 1.2, new mode, and also looking at ways to cordon off areas of maps to create smaller versions, which is something we'd always talked about doing but just didn't do for release. So this one we're playing in right now is really expansive, and it doesn't need to be that big. With 12 players, it feels like a pretty decent size, but your mileage may vary, haha. So we can do half sort of size versions and quarter size versions by sealing off different parts of the maps.
Mm-hmm. I could definitely see that.
It's tough in this game to seal anything off, to be honest, because the cars are so acrobatic.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that was the one thing I'll admit when I was first started playing was, okay, now I'm going to start flying in the air when I was trying to do a bank. Once you get it, it feels very intuitive, but up until that point, it's like, I'm not going to crash. I'm not going to crash. Oh, I crashed.
Yeah. We did, we did a lot of tweaks just before the game released with regards to the amount and extent of air control and the overall maneuverabilities of all the vehicles. And gameplay was a lot slower before and was very solidly based on the ground. You could get air off ramps and whatnot, but then we realized whether we wanted this game to be compared to it or not, people would always compare us to Rocket League. And I think because of that, the prevalence of Rocket League, we really needed to be able to onboard people from that game and be able to have them have an easier experience joining the game. Okay, I'm going to start a point capture game. This is one of the non-deathmatch modes that we have. And similar to most point capture games, there's a central area that we're trying to capture and control. And it can be contested. And the way to regain control over a captured point is to eliminate the team off that point long enough to capture it. And then that'll move into control as well. So it's kind of a tug of war. I set the player limit to 6 because if it gets much beyond that, it becomes very difficult to complete the game, to be honest.
Everybody dogpiles.
Yeah. And that's where some of the vehicle weapons, like right now I've taken a loadout that has 12 missiles that all fire at once. Those sort of like clearing out weapons can be really handy.
Indeed. And can you give us a little bit more insight into the thought process, all of the different ways you were working on crafting the different character classes and all that? Because traditionally, when people think of a class-based game, they think of like Team Fortress 2. They don't really think of cars in that sort of frame of mind. So give us a bit of insight into what all was going on in your head as you were putting it all together.
Yeah, like we did limit, I guess, you can describe them as classes, but basically we have a light, medium, and heavy chassis type, and then we also have a tower chassis type, and each one of those is supposed to be balanced. There's pros and cons to each one, and certainly we just actually did a new balance pass on all that stuff. So if you haven't played for a while, you'll notice that we've now factored in vehicle mass and velocity into ram damage, which makes heavy vehicles a lot more formidable to attack from the front or get. You just do not want to get hit by a heavy by ramming, which is cool. The light vehicles are very agile, very speedy, and they're good at getting in there, shooting up a bunch, harassing, dropping sentry turrets, that kind of thing. So we wanted to give people some different ways to play the game that were not so granular that you would spend 2 hours finicking over one loadout. Like you can make a loadout in a couple of minutes and just try out the different attributes. And I think, my inspiration for all that probably came from playing a lot of Tribes 2, which was class-based and had configurable loadouts. So you could have heavy class guys with giant weapons and light, fast classes as well, and then using those depending on the game modes and the game circumstances. I'll switch classes a few times in one session depending on what's happening on the field.
Yeah. Plus, Tribes did have, while there were the different classes, it did give you a little bit of the modularity with how you could modify them, sort of like what you got going here.
Yeah, so we have not only equipment that sort of has a point value associated with it, so you've got a budget of points you can spend on equipment. We also have 3 free slots for certain types of equipment that are basically just modifiers on what kind of vehicle you want yours to be. So you can have a targeting computer, and those stack. So you have a couple of slots you can fill up with those, and they become a reduced weapon spread, so your weapon is more surgical. There's also like a health boost, which means you'll last longer in combat. So these are the kinds of things that we are trying to do, like larger impact modifications rather than super subtle modifications that are all about min-maxing.
Something fun rather than a stat boost.
Yeah, and I mean we do enjoy those kinds of games to a certain degree. I mean, the tabletop game Car Wars was very forensic in terms of how it was all set up. Microscopic amounts of points being spent on armor here and there, and we just wanted to, as the whole rest of the game works. I mean, it's a cartoon visual game, and the driving is, mostly on the arcade side, and we wanted the equipment to be have that feel as well. So it wasn't super arcane in how to set it up.
How was the transition from doing single player stuff like Rollers of the Realm to doing this very intensely detailed multiplayer title?
Yeah, so for any of your viewers who don't know, we created a game called Rollers of the Realm, which was a pinball RPG and was pretty recently put into a Humble Bundle. There might be a bunch more people who know about the game now, which is cool. So that was a single player only. That was a campaign-based, story-based adventure pinball type game. And doing this game was very, as you can tell, is super, super different. It was a lot of learning that we had to do, a lot of like hard-won battles with technology to get the game to do what we wanted it to do, and a lot of exploration. Because often the game that you think that you want to make, after you begin to roll out the features and mechanics, you realize, geez, it would work a lot better if it was like this instead. So we had some false starts. We had kind of more of a MOBA style play originally, and then we kind of dropped that in favor of what we have today, which is just much more traditional multiplayer.
And
The hardest
another thing,
part with this is
oh,
the
sorry.
networking, to be honest. It's just like very, very difficult to do network games. And so I think game developers all laugh when we see the threads of fans asking, people to just add multiplayer to a single player game. It's like, it's so hard to do good networking games.
And speaking of things that are unconventional, your team opted to do a multiplayer game without a traditional progression system. There's no fancy unlocks, there's no prestige or anything like that. It's much more old school, which is been coming back as a thing. Do you think people are getting tired of having to grind? Was that a conscious decision? Did you try working a progression system in at some point and it just didn't click?
Yeah, I think we had a progression system in mind to varying degrees. When we were looking at the MOBA mode as our main way of playing, there was a tech tree aspect that was being looked at. And I think mostly because of budget constraints, to be honest, it's like we had to make hard choices. And one of the choices was just to get the combat finessed and the multiplayer basics finessed, because we felt like progression was probably something that we could add after the fact if we wanted to. And I think that still holds true. I mean, if people really want it, it is definitely something that we're going to look into. It's just like, I think it's more a testament to many people on the team being older and not like, I just feel like if I pay a price for a game, I want all the stuff from the game. I don't really want to have to like earn it.
Devote hundreds of hours to it.
Yeah, and I mean, hey, people have asked for it, and I just have a hard time. Like, I'm just not really on that wavelength, but it's definitely something that if there's enough demand, we'll certainly consider it. There's lots of ways that we can slice it in terms of how it would be implemented. One thing it could be sort of joined up with is some of the visual customization that we haven't added to the game yet, where there might be hubcaps, rims, decals, hood ornaments, that kind of stuff that might get unlocked.
Mm-hmm. So there is actually a customization system in the works.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of visual customization, it's something we've definitely, it's on our sort of back burner to-do list. There's a lot of considerations around it. So we had and played with a system where you could upload your own decals. I think there might be some age rating issues with that,
Yeah,
or at least some kind of warning or whatever. And Steam, workshop support is another thing that we can look at if people want to, build their own vehicles. Something like vehicle rims, it's pretty easy. like add-ons are pretty easy and different skins. But we have a lot of stuff that we want to do, and we feel like people might want more than that. Like new maps, new modes is something that always comes up. So we'll get around to, well, we hope anyway, we'll get around to everything that people want. It's just there doesn't seem to be an upper limit to what people expect. So we'll just try to do what we can.
Absolutely, and that's completely understandable. I mean, you're an indie team making a full-scale multiplayer title. That's a considerable struggle, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's tough because we made something that, you know, plays like a mainstream multiplayer game, but it was done on an indie budget. And I think we have that uncomfortable, we live in that space where we're not exactly indie enough to be thought of as an indie title, but we don't have $100 million budget. So a lot of what people might expect in a game like this, we just didn't have the budget to do. But we're sort of in that mode now where we're making continual improvements and add-ons and hoping to just continue to add more value to the product as time goes on.
Out of curiosity, when looking back on the project, right back at the start, what's something that you really wish from the start you had known then that you now know? That could, something that other people who are interested in doing multiplayer, a very good tip that you don't know from the very start.
Yeah, I think the networking aspect is just extremely challenging, not only from just a pure technical point of view, but also designing your game around all the things that can happen in networking. And that can be even just stuff like providing a good player experience for disconnections and reconnections and matchmaking and all that stuff. I think when we pitched this project to our funders, we were fairly naive in terms of what would be involved in getting it to run well. And then we did to ourselves kind of increase the scope of the product to be like a full-fledged multiplayer game. And that's our own fault for making the networking even harder than it could have been at the beginning. But networking is something that you can get something running on the network. It's not like it's impossible or super, super hard, but getting it run well and having reasonable lag on all sides and the methods for networking are very challenging.
Also, part of what helped your project become a thing was actually some support from the Toronto Arts Fund.
Oh, actually, yeah. Well, our funders include the Canada Media Fund, which is a national sort of competitive funding that's available. Also, the Ontario Media Development Corporation, which is provincial-based or like state-based, basically. And we also got funding through Factor, which is a music-oriented funding system. So we're really lucky in this country to have access to that kind of stuff. It's not common, really. I mean, the U.S. doesn't really have programs like this.
No.
Yeah, for us, it's a great way to reduce the risk in development and allows us to try new ideas or ideas that are not based purely on, mass market decisions. So that's Rollers of the Realm was the same way. And, if you ask somebody like, how are you going to make money? And they're like, well, I'm going to make a pinball role-playing game. That's pretty risky. But when we can get funding to do something that's on the basis of risk, that some of these funds are about innovation, then we can, experiment and have some fun coming up with unusual IPs.
Indeed. And I'm curious, after everything has gone through with Auto Age, looking way off into the future, do you think you'd be more inclined towards trying some more multiplayer stuff, or do you think maybe next time try another single player thing?
Well, I think that we did learn a lot on this project that it would be a shame not to use again, like all the learning in terms of how to set all this stuff up and some best practices. So, I mean, our inclination is to go multiplayer again. I think what we really overestimated in launching the game was we had a certain amount of wish listers and we had a certain amount of like social buzz around the project. And despite hiring a third-party PR company to help us get the word out, it just didn't launch with an audience of hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands. And that's going to have to be factored into any future multiplayer project that we do, where it just seems the way that the industry is right now, that it's almost a feature of the game that it comes with an audience. And we don't, we're game developers. We're not really game marketers. We're just going to have to learn how to do that part better.
It is something that's coming up a lot more and more recently, the need for getting a consistent audience in multiplayer. I mean, even big stuff's been having a problem with that. I mean, EA Battlefront was so desperate that they had to make their season pass free to get people to come in.
Yeah, and we're considering some drastic measures as well, because we just did not get the launch audience that we thought that we would. And, when we get reviews of the game that are on the basis of whether people are playing the game or not, it's just like, we have to figure this out. It is a fun game to play. It's really fun to play with other people. So whether it's, a price drop or some steep discounting or somehow finding some bundles, we're going to have to do something a little bit severe just to try to get people in the door and try the game out. So we'll be looking at that probably this month, before the holiday season really kicks in.
On the upside, in your finger, you do have bots, which is something that's strangely kind of not a thing.
Yeah, we have split screen play too, which is it's a great way to play the game with up to 3 other people at your house, and you can all go online together. So, I mean, it's got some good features. It just didn't get the uptake on day one that we were hoping for, and so we need to sort of fix that and get people in the door.
Actually, coincidentally, reminds me of something I heard about with Rocket League. Did you hear about their first game? It had a ludicrously long name.
Yes, yeah, it was the battle cars. That
Yeah,
game.
they did that one, and then it completely tanked. But then Rocket League got that boost from PS Plus, and then by doing that and simplifying it, it actually turned things around. That was a surprising story to hear, considering just now everybody talks about Rocket League, but they forget that Psyonix for the longest time, they didn't get really known. I mean, even Nosgoth, they did Nosgoth. That was fantastic, and I never played it.
Yeah, it's just really tough to do audience building and to predict and react to market changes. And, when we pitched this game, it was 3 years ago, and a lot in the industry can change in that time. And, it's difficult as developers to stay on top of every single thing that we have to stay on top of. We're a studio of 8, give or take, depending on the production. And, yeah, I mean, it's we're going to know better, I guess, for our next multiplayer title in terms of like what the actual scope of that kind of thing is. But it's obviously it's bigger than we ever thought.
And going for something a little bit lighter, what would you say is probably your favorite part of Lock Age?
I like the speed of play. It's also not very punishing to die, in my opinion, anyway. So it's the kind of game where you have a blast playing for a minute or 2 at a time, or 30 seconds, or whatever kind of luck you have while you're playing. And unlike Rollers of the Realm, which was kind of hard for different reasons, this game is not really going to get blamed. The game itself is not going to get blamed for you dying. You're going to blame, the person that killed you, and you're probably going to be motivated to try to do better instead of rage quit. So I think we kind of captured that fun part of gameplay where the penalty for death is just like, dang it, I died. Let's pick a different vehicle this time and try again, rather than like, this game is frustrating and I want to quit and die.
No 360 no scopes.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is your preferred car class?
Ooh.
Chassis class?
Well, I really like the lights. I'm always a fan of agility in games and also harassing people and making their lives hell. So I like the light for that because you can really dance around opponents. And when you've got a sentry turret dropper, a few nicely placed droppables can, really change the game. So yeah, I like the light ones. And we used to, so I've now I have to learn to play differently because we rebalanced things so that ramming from the lights used to be a lot more powerful, and now we nerfed them quite a bit because they were sort of OP. And now that you're using your agility to get the hell out of the way of heavies, which do a lot more ram damage than they ever did. And so there's all this metagaming inside the game around how you're hitting vehicles, where you're hitting vehicles, are you attacking? Are you running? There's a lot of depth to gameplay that I think isn't really apparent necessarily in like 10 minutes of play.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And how about after this map, we check out the new one?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we got about 52 seconds left in this, and then we can play a tiny arena map. So we're probably going to do at least another one of these small maps. So this one, Crossroads, that we're on right now is one of our earlier ones. And the player limit on this probably maxes out around 8. If you have much more than that, it's like sheer chaos, which actually can be kind of fun.
Or like playing Super Smash Brothers, where you've got 8 players at once.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we made an even smaller map, which really is best for about maybe 4 people or one-on-one duels. And it's got
that's great.
Yeah, and it's got a moat of deadly energite in it that you need to avoid. So I'll just warn you, don't fall in.
Don't fall into the water.
All right, so I will host up a game on Core Sample, which is that map I was just talking about with 4 players, and I'll do straight up deathmatch. This one should be pretty crazy. And we'll do a short time limit on this one, maybe 6 minutes. We'll make it 5 minutes. Here we go.
The 13th country.
We're consistently amused by the random game name generator.
Yeah, I think the last one we were on was like Project Chicken Throwaway.
It's accurate. Okay, I'm going to see if Nerf Gun, one of our team, will join this one. It's a way better with human beings. Let's see if we'll get him in. I'll go on our Slack and see if I can fish him out.
Speaking, though, of all these darn machines taking over our hard bots jobs in Auto Age, out of curiosity, what went into designing bots for a car combat game? Because that's gotta be a little weird. Because the normal FPS, you're walking around, and with racing, you've got a very simple rule set. But here things are very different. You've got sort of a halfway rule set for each.
Yeah, like our tech director, Joss Ewell, is chiefly responsible for the vehicle AI, and we use a lot of the built-in game engine tools like nav meshes that basically help the bots know where they are in a map or how they can get from one point to another point. But then it's all the sort of list of ingredients that go into these bots is very detailed, but also is simple enough that we don't have 3,000 parameters to adjust every time we want to change their behavior. So they do a lot of things that, this is basically all good bots are simpler than you think. They just make you feel like there's intention behind what they're doing. And that is certainly what we're doing here, where their weapons fire independently of the AI brain. So it's just a reaction that if the weapon sees you, it'll fire at you. I'm going to demystify a little bit in terms of how all this works, but they'll also jump fairly randomly or boost fairly randomly. The things they do on purpose are applying handbrake to try to make tight turns. And they can actually, they're really quite maneuverable. So it's pretty cool to see them when they're on their game. When they're not really looking too good, that also tends to stick out. So they're not great teammates. They are a little dumb around how close they want to be to other teammates, and they can kind of get in your way a little bit. But for deathmatch, they really want to smash you in your car face and do max damage. So they're pretty fun to play with.
Smash you in your car face. I like that. Interesting. So it actually sounds a little bit like sort of the methodology put into the Fear AI, where a lot of that was making it feel like they were thinking. And I actually like the sound of it being randomized because realistically, you look at the average player playing the game, they do kind of boost around a little chaotically, and it's nice to know that the computer has as itchy a trigger finger as I do.
Yeah, it's the appearance of intention. Humans are really good at anthropomorphizing robots, and so you feel a lot of the time like they're doing something because of you, and sometimes they are, so they know where you are and they want to steer towards you and they want to kill you and shoot at you. But you'll be coming in for a ram and they'll jump over you and then they'll do a handbrake turn and come at you, and half that is them just jumping coincidentally and you attribute intention to that. So it's pretty fun. And how this benefits the game is that we cut down on CPU cycles that would normally be spent on the bots thinking way too much. And so in simplifying it, it just benefits the multiplayer aspect.
And speaking of keeping things slick, in terms of the visuals, you went for a very cel-shaded style, and it keeps a very solid frame rate. I'm wondering, was there some intermingling there, or did you just right away, it was like, we're going to go for sort of a Borderlands-y feel?
Yeah, we had different look and feel in the early days of the project, and I knew that I wanted something stylized for the look because we're a little tired of photorealism. I'm not a huge proponent of photorealism. Like, it has its benefit. I think AAA games are a perfect vehicle for that. But for us, we wanted to be able to produce assets affordably. And if you have to do things photorealistically, you're eating a lot of budget for stuff that may not really be gameplay related. So we developed all kinds of different looks, art looks, one of which was kind of more of a painterly style that looked like 70s pulp, actually almost like No Man's Sky to a certain degree.
Interesting.
And yeah, then we pulled away from that when I developed some visual effects that really popped as animation. And we knew we had what we wanted and sort of proceeded along those lines. So it took a lot of iterations to get this, and there's the reasons for it are like budget related and style. We just like to do things with distinctive styles, and the color aspect. Really, like, I think most vehicular combat games are really drab, and I'm kind of really tired of that style. I wanted something like 80s cartoons that were pure color.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And speaking of going for something a bit unconventional, you and your team have a habit. I mean, you look at Rollers of the Realm, and you look at Auto Age, you look at these genres that were used a fair bit. I mean, pinball games used to be a much more regular thing on the digital scene. Aside from that one series that they've had going on PlayStation, there's not a lot of that these days. But then you made an RPG in a pinball game. And there were a lot of car combat games, but now you've made a full-fledged car combat game. So I'm wondering, are there any other genres that you're looking at and like, you could see more of this again?
Yeah, I mean, everybody in the company is basically like a creative technologist, and we all have great ideas, and we have too many great ideas to actually produce. So we are always workshopping things in terms of bouncing ideas off of each other. I think definitely multiplayer is something we're looking at. I feel like there's something to be done with Twitch, streaming integration, Twitch community integration, maybe Discord integration. Because really, like I was saying earlier in the chat, we have to keep our audience engaged and give them the tools to be able to participate in gameplay beyond just the actual gameplay. So I think, we'll be looking at things like that as hooks. And I don't know, certain genres, there's so many. I would like to think we're going to pick something a bit unusual, but we are going to be more careful with our next title because this is a niche genre. Car combat, is not super prevalent. I like to think it's coming back to a fair. I mean, we hope to God it's coming back because we'll sell more units of the game. But we have to be careful in not picking something that's so obscure that the audience is microscopic.
Yeah, calculated risk.
Yeah, I think so. And, fortunately, the industry is really good about publishing popularity stats for different types of games. So we may look to that and see what our next project will be. We'll probably try to get something into early stage development next spring. We really want to give this game some time to flourish and air out and, continue to add content and improvements.
Excellent. And that's another thing that really warrants discussion that a lot of people don't get to dig into. How do you work out the roadmap for this sort of game? Because say if you're developing story content, you can very easily lay out, okay, there's going to be this mission this way. But for multiplayer, you have to line up, depending on how it's built, different characters or different weapons, different classes, different maps, and you have to make sure that all fits in active, organic sort of experience, because the multiplayer can shift. The way the meta works might not even be how the developers plan some games.
Yeah, we are doing things in iterations. So we planned out our 1.1 release based around what was a high payoff for players and also easy to produce. So, a lot of people were asking for a campaign mode. That's just not something we can do in a 1.1 release. And unless enough people buy copies of the games, there may never be a campaign mode. But yeah, like every new feature that we roll out needs to have a workout, and we need to see how people are actually going to use it, because there's only so much accounting for what users will do until you actually see it in the field. We just went over our list of 1.2 features and content, and we took a couple things off the list because they're moot now because of how people are playing 1.1. We made some really good rebalancing changes for the better, and so now we've taken some things off of our list that are not necessary now. So I think just having a lot of experience producing games and understanding our game really well and listening to people who are playing, that helps to shape what we roll out in the future. But generally, our approach is, what is the highest payoff for players that is the easiest for us to produce? Sometimes we will, we haven't had to do it yet, but we may have to go away for 6 weeks and come back with something major. But right now, we're going to be able to do some quick content releases that will add a lot of dimension to the game.
Nice. And to give people an idea about the scale of things, how long do you say it takes for one map to start from the gray boxing stage or conceptualizing it all the way to actual final release?
So the game, the maps that the game shipped with in September were around for at least a year each, and we made many iterative changes to those maps over time. So, but in doing that, it helps to develop a vocabulary of what is sensible and possible, and what provides the best kind of gameplay. So future maps, generally speaking, will be quicker. And then in terms of us kind of sealing off parts of these maps to make smaller versions, we know already in our own minds where some of the best parts of each map are, and we can isolate those. And that's a really easy way to add new playable like a new dynamic to maps people are already used to, because we'll redistribute spawn points and we'll redistribute pickups, and it'll make it feel like a new map. So it takes a lot of honing, and sadly you have to throw out a lot. And we're going to keep refining. There's a few areas of the map we just played that are going to get smoothed out soon. All right, let's go back to... Oh, we can do... do you want to do point capture on the map we just played?
Sure.
Okay.
So this is point capture some more maps now.
Yeah, we just added it to Ghost Town, which is the one that we just played, and it's very different in feel from the Eagle's Nest map, point capture. There's areas where you can knock people off. It's basically at the top of the apartment block on Ghost Town, and there's lots of little nooks and crannies to hide in, and provides a kind of interesting space to do point cap in.
I know this next question is going to be a bit of an odd one, but I gotta know, where did the tower type come from? Because the other character, all of the different chassis, I can kind of follow where it comes, but the tower, it's interesting. You built a support class that's in a racing game, and I've rarely seen that done.
Yeah, I mean, we had towers made for our mobile mode, and for a long time they were just kind of kept around because we didn't want to get rid of them. And then we found that they kind of had their uses as a sort of a support class in team-based modes. So we kind of continued to polish and refine those. And they're just, I think they're hilarious. I mean, they're obviously quite phallic in design. But beyond that, they're just very intimidating looking, and yet they're not impossible to kill. They're not the toughest vehicle in the game because they're sacrificing a lot of speed, which means you can get in there and ram them to death. And a lot of the players who have spent time playing, they know how to kill towers. So it's really effective for people to take if there's new players in the game. But if you're playing with experienced players, you're probably going to get taken down. However, if you play point cap and everybody on your team takes a tower with team healing, that is pretty damn tough to get around. They have the toughest missile launcher in the game, and if you're just sitting on a point defending it, I can see that being tough to get around.
They turn it into Mordor. And there you go.
Case in point. We'd actually had artillery in the game at one point as well, so it'll be fun to see if we can bring that back.
Oh, nice. And in terms of engaging with your community, getting their feedback, where all are you getting that? I mean, obviously you have your Steam forums, and you've got various people doing streams and stuff like that, but what's been the biggest resource for you in getting people's feedback?
I would say the Steam forums and Discord are probably number one. I guess maybe Discord number one. So we've kept a chat channel open or server open in there for quite a while. We were thinking that we were going to release the game last year around this time. I'm glad that we waited. And we were able to really leverage some like super fans, people who are really good at playing the game and teasing out aspects that we did not imagine would be a thing. So there's certain exploits that they discovered, and most of those we fixed. I won't tell you about the rest. Those are on our to-do list. But yeah, it's great to get even 3 or 4 people who are super keen on the game giving you feedback on it, and that they understand what it's about and how to play. And our biggest sort of issue right now is just finding virality, getting the game name out there, and I think probably a price drop is what's going to happen for people to get more interested.
And outside of the networking, is there any other advice that you would offer for anyone else considering something like this who wants to make a multiplayer experience that isn't just another Call of Duty?
I guess finding ways to force constraints on yourself. This is really for any game. I find with junior teams or individuals that they start with the bar too high, and you can have a great multiplayer game without all of the same features as something that costs 500 times more than what you can afford. So, you know, aiming low, but not in a negative way, aiming low in a I can get this game done way. Also, picking one or two feature mechanics that are your strongest mechanics in the game, and focusing on honing those and making those super fun to use, and then expanding the range of things that the player can do. We started out mostly just driving and ramming in this game, and then we added jumping, and that changed things a lot. And then we added boosting, which changed things a whole lot. And then we discovered that our physics engine would let us do things like ride on walls, and it really changed how the game's actually played. So one step at a time, if you can do it. And even though you may have an ultimate vision, we have lists of things where one of our buckets or silos is nice to have. And if you're good about being realistic about what's doable, and what's going to go on that nice to have list versus have to have list, then you can get it done. Otherwise, you're going to get mired in trying to keep up with a feature set that's too big for you to handle.
Mm-hmm. We just move all riding along and slow back. It's just seems an air cloud on top. Another nice thing that I did see is that you guys are regularly engaging with the gaming community. You don't get to see that a lot of developers are in there playing with the players. They might do it like on one weekend, and then they're immediately back to working on updates and stuff.
Well, we do a fair bit of play. We have to play our own game, and I happen to love this game, so it's like I can't work on it nonstop. I'm a grown up with a mortgage and a family, and I got obligations that I have to attend to, and so I can work on it a lot. I can work on it during my work days. I can put in a little extra time every day, but I need time to chill out as well. And I also happen to love playing as a way to blow steam off. So we are trying to be sort of as hands-on as we can, so that when feedback comes, we're sort of right there to hear it in context. Because a lot of the times you get feedback and you don't really know what the circumstances were that caused them to say that. But if you're actually in the game playing with them, you can get a better handle on why they made that comment.
Mm-hmm. And to round things out, at the end of all my entries, I like to let my interviewee ask me and or my audience a question. So if you'd like, you can. If you want to think it over for a minute, that's fine.
That's a great opportunity. I got to make it count. Let me think about that for a second. I guess one of our challenges is presenting the depth of the gameplay, because there's a lot more than meets the eye, to borrow the Transformers tagline, to this game. And you can't really get that in a 10-minute stream or a reviewer that spent 5 to 10 minutes on the title. So if your viewers, after seeing gameplay, if they have any ideas or suggestions for us on how we can sort of better present the multi-dimensional aspect to the game, beyond what it just looks like, I'm all ears. So they can join us on Discord or the Steam forums. They can add us at Phantom Compass on Twitter. We're on Facebook as well, easy to find there. Basically, we have all channels open for hearing critique and comments about the game.
Awesome. All right, Tony, thank you so much for playing with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah, it's good times. I really appreciate the time that you took to talk with me today. And yeah, hopefully your viewers can check us out on Steam.
Absolutely. All right. And if you want to check out my review, the video will be appearing above. Thank you for joining us. Stand, drive for the human race. Stand, you've got to drive for freedom, to fight the evil in the Western ways. Auto age, auto age, auto age.